Okay, so I was just, it's been a bit on the back of my mind over the last few months. I've been keeping an eye on the New Romantic movement as a movement of poetry and culturally as well, that I've seen a few different Substackers talking about, and it's been doing the rounds, and I saw it again this morning, and I thought I would, in light of the swear framework and the poetry of ladder, we could actually put together a pretty coherent critique, or critical appraisal rather, of what it stands for and what it has to offer and what it's insufficient in. So let's get into it. So I've just picked a few quotes from a few different articles on New Romanticism, both on Substack and elsewhere, that I think kind of exemplify the movement thus far, as it's been popularized and discussed in the online discourse. So someone was talking about how for them New Romanticism was a return to poetic language and common speech. Dr. Anjan Chatterjee, in the New Romantics article on Psychology Today, said, like 2 centuries years ago, an unlikely group of people are converging to combine science, nature, art, and aesthetic. They committed to the ideas that nature can be restorative and the arts can be transformative. And Ross Barkin, in The Rise of the New Romanticism, wrote, "Trust in the science did not curdle at the same instance as trust in the tech conglomerates, but they are not so dissimilar when weighed against the hype of progress. The New Romantics wonder, what good has any of this done for us? Were hyper-sophisticated GPS devices, cameras, and pockets for computers worth it?" So the way that it's sort of been conceptualized is either as a kind of use of language, common speech, and as a series of ideas that are, broadly speaking, anti-technology and pro-connection, nature, art and culture. What I'm going to argue is that essentially this is the reduction, the kind of reduction that's characteristic of the scholar types. They are employing, insofar as they are trying to understand, appropriate and reapply the initial Romantic philosophy, they're trying to do so in a way that they're trying to do it through the lower parts of... If you remember in my second presentation in this framework, when I discussed the implicit ontology, and we came up with the different planes, the instinctive plane, the emotional plane, and the mental plane, and we traced out how each of the different 4 types of poets all utilizes different aspects of them. So we've got in the sentimental type, it's the solar plexus, it's personal emotion. So it's the lower emotional plane. Then in the scholar we have, it's less about the personal emotion, so that's not really a part of it, and it's more the concrete part of the mental plane, which is the lower part of the mental plane. It's not the abstract vision that the scryers at the top of the developmental sequence have. What I'm trying to say is that the scholars, in trying to understand New Romanticism and in their proposal of what it is, they are talking about it in terms of the ideas messages. They're utilizing the concrete part of the mental plane to understand something that is essentially essence and vision. That was the real living center and core of the Romantic movement. Yes, the forms of the ideas and the concrete thought forms of ideas around the importance of nature and the dangers of technology were definitely present. And the importance of a common kind of a common speech, all of that is present in the Romantics. But as I would just repeat the analogy I used in one of my previous presentations. The spirit behind the Romantics is like the tide that washes up the seashells on the shore. And if we just look at the seashells and go, oh, look at that pattern, let's repeat that pattern, then we are fundamentally misunderstanding the nature of what brought it forth, the spirit that brought it forth. And that is the actual beautiful, that's the source of the beauty. And it's also the source of what is needed in our society, which I'm going to explain a little bit further in just a minute. So all I want to communicate in this slide is that they're utilizing the wrong part of the planes in order to understand Romanticism, and because of that, they're reducing it. This I do also want to say that, and this is what I tried to indicate with this diagram, this little bar graph, is that the little circle that I've made on this curve indicates where I think New Romanticism is. It's still above other poetics that scholars have made, and as a part of their wrought poetics. For instance, the New Criticism, the School of New Criticism, which was all about a real focus on the form of the poem to the exclusion of any underlying psychological truth or effect or essence or vision, and very deliberately dismissed and explicitly dismissed those aspects of the whole sort of critical creative process. So is the New Romantic movement, as it has been formulated, as the quotes I showed at the beginning of this presentation show, is it a step up? Yes, it is a move towards something that has a bit more life in it, definitely. And to that extent, it's needed and useful and good. And we should be, I think, jumping on board, and we are in large part, whether we call ourselves New Romantics or not. I think there is a growing skepticism around technology and the importance of nature and connection and art. So that's good. What I want to communicate now is that while that's all good, it's still not radical enough, because it's still not giving people what is actually spiritually needed. People don't just need more art and less technology and more connection and culture and art and all that. All of those things are needed, yes, but if we just have that, then I still think we've got a poetics and a philosophy that is impoverished and lacking something essential. So in order to explain that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw on this famous quote. I think it has been appropriated to Einstein, but I'm not sure if it is Einstein. It could be Carl Jung. But the idea is out there in the collective sort of consciousness. The world that we have made as a result of the level of thinking we've done thus far creates problems that we cannot solve at the same level as the level we created them at. Okay, so this I think really captures what I'm trying to get at. Culture, nature, less technology, these things, if they are, it's still not something new and novel in them. It's still more or less it would essentially equate to just doing more of the things that are already there, and I don't think that's a step. But I think we need a richer poetics. What I think is that we need not just something on the same plane as the problems that face our society, which is a concrete mental proposal with personal emotions. We need a vertical movement to another plane. So we need something new. I think that's, if you recall the bar graph on the previous slide, that's what's going to tilt it into the next stage of development, wild poetry and wisdom poetry, which is when there is actually some living essence that's communicated through the poem or the work of art to the reader, that puts them directly through their being in touch with something higher and yet not distant enough that they can't relate to it. It's a deeply intimate, relational kind of knowing through being of something that is of a spiritually nutritious benefit. And that's why I've used throughout this series the metaphor of nutrition, that essence and vision, which is which are on a continuum, when it is communicated and received properly, it gets assimilated and appropriated into the structures of the reader's being. And when that happens, it's a facilitation not just of a very deep kind of connection, which is again needed, but also a facilitation of growth. And that is what I think the romantic movement, or the new romantic movement, should be. It's not a throwback to some kind of past without technology, some kind of golden age of art and culture and connection. It should be the vanguard of the future growth of man. And I think Sri Aurobindo talks about it in that light in his book Future Poetry. So I think he would agree with what I'm saying. The movement needs to be a shepherding of who we are becoming. And I think that is a much deeper and a more daring and a more radical proposal that's actually responsible to what people need. And I think without that missing piece, that essential piece, the new romantic movement will be of value, but it won't do all that a poetics and a philosophy can do, and I think should do. So I'll leave it there on that note, and also on the note that we can apply this swear framework, or this ladder of poetry, to the to emerging movements, and we can start to track them where they're at. And ultimately, what we need to do, I think, is start to create we need an awareness of this bar graph, and we need to start directing our energy towards the upper end of it, and what we can create there it's interesting. I mean, my thought just goes to the fact that Matthew Arnold's quote about poetry replacing religion, and whether or not you agree with that. I think there does need to be a revitalization of both poetry and religion in the modern age, so that we're building spaces where man not only has meaning, but he is able to start to come into relation to what he is becoming. Which is something like that exponential, that curve that just keeps climbing in the bar graph. And I think we need a space for that. We need to be able to hold that. The kinds of, not necessarily so that is explicitly understood by everyone who is the beneficiary of this, of the kinds of poetics and philosophical movements that are participating in this kind of thing that I'm trying to describe. So not that they need to fully understand it, but that it still needs to be accessible for when they are ready, and there still needs to be some kind of backgrounding of that potential, because currently there aren't really spaces that do that. And in the back of my mind as I'm saying this, I'm reminded of just a few people I've observed lately talking about how can we create these kinds of spaces. So I think it is something that's out there. I think people are wanting to generate and participate in communities that have not only a framework and a telos that do have a framework and a telos that kind of I don't even know what the word is, helps to kind of home them, but also organize the life, like organize their being in a way that gives them a structure and affording almost trellis, scaffolding, that can work on them in ways that are both conscious and unconscious. Because currently there's a lack of that, and I think people are starving for it. So this seems like a good place to leave it, and let me know if this does any thoughts, and we'll see where it goes next.